Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Operating the Ham Radio Satellites. I'm Mitch, W1SJ, and I'm not really an active satellite user. It's kind of interesting. I'm kind of like a DX or contester type thing, but I do field day, and you get 100 points for making satellite contacts at field day. And you know how it works? I mean, I'd sell my own mother out to make 100 points at field day, right? So, our satellite guy quit, and it was left to me. And to do this right for the satellites, you kind of have to get on the week before and see what satellites are around, because they're constantly dropping out of the sky, or they're putting up new ones, whatever, and you want to make sure the equipment works. And so I'm always on like the third week of June for field day, and then I turn the stuff off and I don't bother with it. I actually got on this December because I was actually borrowing a radio from a friend. I wanted to try it out, so I was playing with it then. And I realized I'm the only one in Vermont who gets on the satellites. Actually, I worked somebody a couple of weeks ago, the first Vermont station I've ever worked, actually. There's not a lot of us on, and you get on the satellites pretty quiet, so I figured maybe get some of you people more interested in this. So let's walk through this. The first thing is basic satellite physics. It dictates the parameters to put something in orbit. You don't just throw it up there and it sticks, right? There's some science that goes behind it. And orbit is achieved when the centripetal force equals the gravitational force. So centripetal force is, you know, like when you get off the highway and it's a really sharp curve, and you're like me and you try to go as fast as you can, and if you're going to the right, you're kind of thrown off the left side of the car, right? It kind of forces you into the door. Well, that's a centripetal force. You'll go flying off into nowhere's land, but the friction of the tires keeps the car on the road. It counters the centripetal force. And of course, if you try this in January, the friction isn't that good on ice, and you do go off into the median. So that centripetal force, something spinning around, it's going to want to go fly off into space, but that's countered by the gravitational force that the Earth exhibits on us. Because if there was no gravity, we'd just be flying off into space, right? So this is what it kind of looks like. There's our satellite orbit, and you have the gravitational force and the centripetal force. Orbit is achieved when those two are equal. So the centripetal force is based on your speed. It's your speed squared divided by the radius. The radius goes to the center of the Earth, which means that the faster you're going, the more force you're going to be thrown off into space. But then the gravitational force is pulling you back in, and that's based on your mass, the mass of the Earth, divided by the radius squared times some constant, right? When those are equal, you have orbit. And a low satellite, a low orbit satellite has to go faster, has to spin faster to stay in orbit, where something high up, like the moon, doesn't have to go as fast. That's how it works. So we start with geostationary satellites, because that's what we can kind of focus in on. You know, when you want to watch HBO or whatever, that's a geostationary satellite. That's a satellite that moves at the Earth's speed. Now this may come as a complete shock to you, but right now, you're moving at 1,037 miles per hour. So am I. So is all of you. Okay? Moving that, I don't feel it, because the air is moving also, right? We're all moving at that. That's the velocity of the spin of the Earth. And so you take those two equations, centripetal force and gravitational force, and you solve for V, or with V being 1037 miles per hour, and you get a distance above the Earth of 22,236 miles. That's geostationary. So when you're up there, you can see about 4,800 mile radius. You can see like maybe 40% of the Earth, but you can't see the rest of the Earth though, because you're not moving. But there are only a finite amount of parking spaces, and you don't want to pay the bill on what it costs to park up there. And it means hams need not apply. We can't get there. It's filled up at the end. So what we do is we do low Earth orbiting satellites. They're not geostationary. They move quite fast. You have to track the satellite. You have to point the antenna somewhere to get to it. And these are typically 200 to 800 miles above the Earth. but they travel at 1,600 miles per hour. They travel real fast. And actually, if you look at just after sunset, when the sky just starts to get dark, and you track the side, you can actually see the satellite moving across the sky if it's a clear night. And it moves pretty fast, actually. So the pass is only going to last 10 to 15 minutes. That's it. Yeah, if you're going to sit there and do a long discourse, it ain't going to work. You got to like get your call sign out, get the 5-9, your grid square, and get off of there, right? And there's usually only 4 passes in a particular spot per 24 hours at a particular location. Okay, so it's bang bang. You got to hurry up. So let's talk about some satellite terms with this. So we all speak in the same language. AOS means acquisition of signal. It means that the satellite's coming over the horizon with the first point you could see it. When you can see it, you can hear it. That's called AOS. But when the satellite passes over and goes beyond the Earth, then it's called LOS, loss of signal. And I don't care how much power you're running, how many beams, you're not going to get through the Earth. Not happening. You may get a little degree or two below LOS, but you ain't going to go there. So a high pass is a satellite that goes way up in the sky, maybe 70 to 90 degrees, almost overhead. A low pass is one that only goes up maybe 10 degrees. Okay, it means you have to have a pretty good antenna. But the satellite's further away, the signals are weaker. How far can you go with a satellite? Well, if the satellite's high up, you can go further than if the satellite is lower. So RS-44 is one of the satellites, one of the better ones. It's 750 miles up. It's actually, it runs between 700 and 900 miles up. It's an elliptical orbit. It could see 2,500 miles. All right? And that's satellite to ground station. You multiply that by 2, right? Because 2 guys at either end. So you can go 5,000 miles. I've regularly worked people in Europe on that thing when it's a pass up to the Northeast. I hear Europeans on there, and I actually got a guy in Alaska on it. Okay, so really good. The lower satellites, no, you don't hear that far. The ISS, which is the International Space Station, that's low. That's 200 miles up. And it only sees about maybe 1,400 miles, which is 2,800 miles total. So that's good for work in the east coast of North America, not much further than that. Of course, the geostationary satellite, if we were allowed to use one, could go much further.
How high are the geostationary ones?
22,236 miles versus 800. Okay.
Oh.
They're a lot higher. You also need to run more antenna gain too because they're further away. All right, so you need to track the satellite. You need to know where the satellite is and what direction to point the beams. You can run it on a computer. I run it on a DOS computer. I have an old DOS program. It works. I don't have to worry about anything. And the tracking elements can be found at amsat.org. So the way you track an orbiting body is through what's called the Keplerian elements. There are 8 Keplerian elements. If you know all these elements, you know exactly where that satellite's going to be. Okay, so some of them, write all this down because we can give you a quiz later. The epoch is when you actually take the measurement. The satellites move around, so these will change. Orbital inclination, that's the tilt at the equator. Is it going straight up or kind of at an angle? The right ascension of ascending node, it's called RAAN. It's where the orbit should, what longitude the satellite passes the equator at. The argument of perigee is the angle of the orbit. The eccentricity is the shape of the orbit. Is it circular or is it elliptical? It shoots out. Okay, we have a few elliptical satellites. The mean motion, how high it is, the mean anomaly, the angle of the orbit, and finally the drag, the amount of orbital decay. And you put these in, the ARL has these things called the 2-line KEPS format, or Keplerian format. And basically for each satellite, and this is condensed, it's a lot bigger than this. For each satellite, it has the satellite catalog number and the actual timestamp and the different elements. Don't try and edit this on your own, you'll mess it up. But you can download this right from amsat.org, put it into your satellite tracking program, it will know what to do with them. And this is one thing I learned, you got to keep it updated because satellites decay in orbit. In other words, they're going around, and they start drifting down towards the Earth, okay? Because there's the atmospherics, particularly the low ones. The gravity changes a little bit, atmospheric drag, and the expensive satellites, they have a rocket that they push here and they push it right back up, right? The cheap satellites don't have that. So what happens? They get lower and lower, and they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. They burn up. Except with Skylab, it only burnt up partially, and pieces of Skylab were falling on people's houses. You remember that deal, right? Yeah, you got to. That's what you got to. How come the moon doesn't fall out? The moon's far enough away where it's not affected by drag. So the Keplerian elements change, and I didn't realize this. I had the elements set up for late June, and then I got on in July an ISS. ISS is very low, and I'm noticing that the satellite was not coming. The AOS was not at the appointed time, and it went past LOS. I said, something is wrong here, and I reloaded the Keplerian elements, and it changed quite a bit. That's a low satellite, and they probably pushed it back up. So you know, every so often you got to kind of download those. And like I said, it's a two-line format that you see from the ARRL. It's there. Do it, you know, whatever. So a tracking program. The three important things is the time, the azimuth. Azimuth is it northeast, southwest, or the elevation. Is it 0, which is straight to the horizon, or all the way straight up, which is 90 degrees. And the program presents these parameters every minute. It will inform you how to set the azimuths and elevation rotors, assuming you have a rotor. I often do not. And the program can be a very simple list, or it can be fancy with images or whatever. So I use a program from about 100 years ago called Predict. And I ran this last Sunday. This is for RS-44. So you see the day and the time. The time is in UTC. Don't forget, you got to convert UTC to Eastern time, otherwise you're going to be 4 hours off, right? So this 1947 here that we see on the top, that's 3:47 in the afternoon, and the elevation is 0. That is AOS. That's when you first start to hear the satellite. Actually, you won't start hearing the satellite until usually around between 8 and 10 degrees, unless you've got a really good setup. This is the azimuth, so this thing's coming up kind of towards the south. And those are the three important things. Then they talk about the phase, the latitude and longitude. So for instance, when we get to the third line, 23 degrees latitude, 80 degrees longitude, that's kind of like Florida, okay? The range and the orbit number. I like the orbit number. I like to keep track of how old the satellite is. Now I have a different mode in this program where I can just put it in the track mode, and it will tell me automatically what direction it is. I say, okay, right now, this direction and this elevation. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. I do this ahead of time, and this tells me, okay, let me preset the rotors, let me get ready for this thing, and then I put it into tracking mode. Now, what happens if two satellites are within view at the same time? Pick one. There have been stories of people going into one satellite and going into another satellite. That's an experience thing. So frequencies, how do you get into the satellite? Well, satellites mostly operate from 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Typically 145.5 to 146. That's the satellite band. People put repeaters there for some reason. You're not supposed to. It's against the law. Part 97 says no repeaters at 145 to 146. We hear repeater outputs. There's a Fox box out on the line. It's on 145 6th Street. That's in the satellite band. Right? If the satellite's listening there, you're going to hear it. This is the Fox box. And then on the UHF side, it's 435 to 438. Now Oscar 7 is at 432. That was before we had a band plan. That thing was put up in 74.
One band typically input the other output, they swap.
They swap back and forth depending on the satellite. There are some satellites on 23 centimeters, which is 1296. There's a few on 13 centimeters. There's even, they're up at as much as 10 gigahertz. But at those frequencies, the path loss keeps going up. The actual signal strength isn't as strong. And so you need high gain antennas for those bands. That's the thing. And even between 2 meters and 430, 2 meters is a lot easier to hear the satellite than on UHF. UHF is going to be quite a bit weaker. There were older satellites, the old Russian RS satellites, the radio support satellites, were on 10 and 15 meters. That was great. You could hear that with a wet noodle. It was super, right? But, there's a big but. When 10 and 15 meters was open, your signal goes up. It doesn't go to the satellite, bounces off the ionosphere, goes back to Earth. Oops. Doesn't happen much anymore, but that was a problem then. So the uplink is the frequency you transmit on and the satellite receives. The downlink is the frequency you receive and the satellite transmits on. And they got to be on different bands. Because satellite, they don't have room for a duplexer. You know, duplex is like about yay high. They can't put that on board. So one band is for receive, one band is for transmit. And they're either called a VU or a UV. A VU means your uplink is on VHF, your downlink is on UHF. And a UV is uplink on UHF, downlinks on VHF. What that means to me, when I see VU, it means that it's going to be harder to hear the satellite because it's going to be the weaker UHF I'm trying to listen to. If it's a UV, it means I should run a little bit more power. So there are a number of satellite types. Linear transponder or just linear satellites. That's where you do single sideband and CW. There's FM and there's digital. The digitals are mostly FM anyway. It's just digital on FM. Now linear transponder, it covers a range of frequency, usually 30 to 60 kilohertz wide. And if you transmit anywhere within the passband, you're going to be heard coming out of the satellite if you have enough signal. Yeah?
Shouldn't a linear transponder work with any mode because it's just demodulating and remodulating?
Yeah, but if you go on FM, people can get pissed at you. it'll resend you, but you'll hear. Yeah, we hear people we hear repeater outputs sometimes. You're not supposed to do it. So, single sideband of CW. I mean, that's what we do there. Now, all of these satellites are inverting. What does that mean? It means that as you go up frequency and receive, you have to correspondingly go down in frequency to transmit. It also means that you receive an upper sideband and you transmit in lower sideband. People forget that. And they're on the wrong sideband. No, you got to switch the sideband, it's the wrong one. That can be confusing at times. And again, if someone's on my frequency and I move up 2 kilohertz, I have to remember to move down 2 kilohertz to keep the transmitter on. So many stations can use a satellite. You can get a whole bunch of people on there, up into the point where there's so much power being transmitted, the battery can't keep up. Because remember, there's a battery. There's no like extension cord. The battery only gets charged maybe every 30 minutes as the satellite goes around. Right, it goes around the dark side of the sun. It ain't going to be charged. The other problem is that batteries only last a finite amount of time. Okay. How many have electric cars? Only one. You know, at some point, unless you trade up, that battery is going to be toast. And you're going to be spending, what is it, $20,000 for a new battery?
10,000.
10,000, okay. With inflation. Everything I own has a battery I've had to replace. Now, I mean, I know how to take batteries out of things. Most people don't. But that's the thing. Batteries have a finite life. I don't care who makes the battery. It's going to be changed at some point. And the same thing with the satellites. But what happens with the satellites with Oscar 7, which was launched in '74, the batteries are long gone. The sun hitting the chargers, hitting the solar cells, that's what powers it. And I worked it a few years ago. I said, hey, how about that? I worked a 50-year-old satellite. A lot of things don't last 50 years. But FM's like crazy, you know, as you transmit, it kind of drifts and everything because the voltage isn't too stable. And you can't send the Maytag repairman up there to change the battery. That doesn't work. So that is the limitation of this stuff. So yeah, many people can use it. It's fun. It's sideband. Now you have the FM satellites. The FM satellites is a single channel up and a single channel down. You take your local repeater, take it off of the building, and put it up in a rocket ship, get it in orbit. It's the same deal. Okay. It usually requires a CTCSS tone or PL. 67 hertz is usually what they use. No PL, no talkie, right? So you've got to do that. And they call them the Easy Sats. Really? How many have operated Easy Sats? Not so easy, right? You and 200 other people are trying to all use a satellite at the same time. It's CD channel 9, really, is what it is. Everyone's talking. I go back to somebody, and then I'm waiting for the response, and 3 other guys just call CQ on top of them. It's pretty crazy. So it's a battle for the sat. And yeah, people using low power and whatever. Now, I get an advantage. I live up in Vermont near the border, okay? I'm further north than everybody in this room. I'm further north than everybody at this Hamfest except the E2DX, right? He's in Canada, he's north of me. So when that satellite is going north, if it's going south, I'm screwed, but if it's going north, okay, when it gets over where I am, I'm strong and you're not, and now I can rule the satellite until it goes out of range. When it's southbound, I get first dibs on it, and then when it passes me, then you guys win. So that's one thing. Also, FM is about 10 to 15 dB weaker than sideband. Not going to work as far. That's the other thing. So you see a guy with a little HT and a dual band antenna. Yeah, you'll work the satellite when it's right overhead, but not much else. You know, you'll get maybe 2 shots at it, and then people will cover you up. You can get it, hey, I worked the satellite. Hey, Mom, I worked the satellite. But otherwise, you're not going to kind of rule the roost there. A digital satellite is kind of the same thing. Single channel up, single channel down. The beauty of a digital satellite is you program the thing to pass the messages when the satellite's within range. You don't even have to be there. It's an automatic store and forward. Any questions so far? Okay, so I'm either explaining this well or I'm just way over your heads. So satellites run limited power as batteries are limited. So I'm a contester. I mean, if I'm not running a kilowatt, I kind of feel inadequate, right? Batteries are charged by the sun. No sun, no charge. The higher power satellites run about 5 watts. So RS-44 is a big monster. It's about 6-7 feet long and solar cells all over the place. They have big batteries in there. They can run good power. ISS, well, that's a whole space station. They have to run electric to run the whole thing, so they got plenty of power. In fact, when they make live contacts, they use 25 watts. Okay, they can do it. But your lower power satellites like SO50, it's like that big, quarter of a watt. You can barely hear the thing. I always used to say, I used to call it the buddy pole satellite, a hustler satellite. It was always like piss weak of the noise, you know. I could make something as FM, so it's very hard to hear. So now here's the other problem. You have a satellite. I didn't bring my HD with me. So let's believe there's a satellite, there's an antenna sticking out of it, right? And here's the Earth down here. Well, as the satellite rotates and spins, sometimes the polarization is going to be vertical, and sometimes the polarization is going to be horizontal. If you're the wrong polarization, you're going to get cross polarization and get fade. So you can fix that by using an antenna which has horizontal and vertical elements, circular polarization. That's one way to fix it. The other problem is the satellite has the antenna coming out of here and then points away from Earth, and the antenna is blocked by the satellite case itself. Nothing you can do about that. It gets weak, deal with it, and it's going to spin back around, and then you'll hear it again. So
how fast does it spin?
I don't know, like that. I haven't gone up there and looked. It kind of depends.
It'll come around pretty quick.
It comes around. Yeah, eventually will work around. Do you have to use circular polarization? No, I use linear. Doesn't work quite as well. Now here's where it gets interesting. Doppler shift. Doppler shift is a change in frequency due to movement. You can't get around it. It's a law of physics. You can't like push a button and shut it off. If the source and observer move closer to each other, the frequency increases. And then if you're moving apart, the frequency decreases. So when you hear a train whistle blowing, it gets higher as it's moving towards you, and then it gets lower, it moves away from you, right? You say, well, how does this affect us? Satellites don't have train whistles on them. No, the whole frequency changes. So you're listening, and sadly, Doppler shift is a lot. It's 3 kilohertz on 2 meters. That's not too bad. That's within an FM band, right? FM channel. But on UHF, it's 9 kilohertz. Wow, that's quite a bit, right? So what does it sound like? If you're talking to somebody on CW, it sounds like this. It just drifts right out of your bandpass. And you're just sitting there with the VFO cranking it, trying to keep it in the bandpass, whatever. That's what makes it fun. I mean, if you don't do anything, it's just going to, drift right by you. That is how it works. Now, there are automatic means to deal with that, but it's kind of fun doing it on your own. So, antennas at your station, if you want to set something up. A vertical antenna will work. You'll hear stuff with it. It'll be okay for moderate passes, like a pass maybe 20 to 50 degrees or something like that. It's not going to be good for high passes because the satellite directly overhead, well, a vertical is going to null straight up. Not going to be so good. And it's not going to be great for low passes because it doesn't have any gain. So if the pass is out towards the horizon, it's not going to be super great either. So this is why Yagis are a better choice. Well, how about a dipole? Well, dipole has its pluses and minuses too. A circular polarized Yagi will reduce fading and give you gain. Now here's the kicker. You need to have both azimuth and elevation control. When I'm usually playing with satellites, I have neither. Well, what do? I says, I run out. It's funny. I should make a movie that's hysterical. The satellite's in my driveway, and I set it up for the start of the pass. And then about 10 minutes in, 5 minutes in, I rush out there and reset it, rush back in, try to make a contact, rush out, turn it again. And about 3 times I got to do this. Yeah, it's stupid. And I'm having fun, I think. Since then, I put a rotor on there now, so at least, I can control the azimuth. I don't have a rotor for the elevation, so generally I park it at about 25 degrees, which will cover the passes which are to the horizon, and up to about 50, 60 degrees. Not too many passes are dead overhead, so I don't worry about that too much. When I don't want to put the Yagi in the driveway, by the way, I have to move it every time I want to take the car out. I have a UHF Yagi on my tower, 50 feet in the air, great and everything, but it's vertical and it's set, terrestrial. So when that satellite goes up in elevation, I don't hear it anymore. But when it's a low pass, it's like towards Europe, northeast, whatever, I kick butt on that thing because it's got full power right to the horizon. So you pick your poison. Do I want to put a tripod on the roof and do all that stuff? No. And by the way, I live in a pine forest, and pine trees are not very nice towards UHF. VHF doesn't matter, but UHF, pine trees are year-round. And I got pine trees probably in 3 directions. So I just do enough to practice. At field day, we don't have too many trees. It works a lot better. So you need 2 antennas. You need an antenna for VHF or an antenna for UHF. You can get a dual band Yagi with VHF and UHF elements, but you can't run a lot of power because it'll leak from one band to the other. And we found that to use an antenna on the 2 bands running 100 watts, we need 10 feet of separation between the 2 antennas. Otherwise, one will start making noise into the other. So this is what our field day setup looks like. To the left here, that is a 9-element cross-polarized or circular polarized Yagi. Okay? And to the right That is a regular 11 element Yagi. It's a vertical Yagi that I tilted 45 degrees for two reasons. One is it gives it better up and down parameters, and also I don't want it fully horizontal because the horizontal bar will kind of affect the game. And on 2 meters it works fine, yeah.
Any advantage, disadvantage to using circular polarization on uplink?
Circular is better, but I found that on the 2 meter side, we get away with it fine. Okay, so this was a couple of years ago. What we did about 10 years ago was this. So beast number one is this 19 element cross-polarized UHF Yagi, and then I had this 14 element 2 meter cross-polarized. The thing was a bear to pack and carry because you always end up breaking elements. Notice, let's see if you're paying attention here, no rotor. The rotor is this guy with the broomstick right here. That's our rotor. So we assigned some guy, and I'd yell out the directions. Okay, southeast. Okay, up 20 degrees, and he would adjust it with the broom. We've since put a rotor there now.
Armstrong rotor.
Yeah, well, it was a broomstick strong rotor. Yeah, it was. And the problem with those big Yagis, they get really, really sharp, and you have to keep them really pointed well, whereas the smaller Yagis are a little bit wider and they're more forgiving. So that's what we ended up doing is we changed it to this operation, which is a lot easier to do. So when I'm at home, actually, I'll either put this UHF Yagi in my driveway, or I'll just use my little, I have what's called a Quaggy. It's a quad Yagi deal that N6ND invented years ago. That's up to tower, and I have another 2 meter Yagi that some of the elements are horizontal, some of the elements are vertical. That wasn't done on purpose. The wind did that, and I don't feel like taking the tower down to fix it. Yeah?
What about antenna with elements from a dual band antenna?
Dual band antenna, you can't run a lot of power because it'll leak. It'll generate noise in the receiver. And you have to have a very hot receiver to hear UHF. So, yeah, you can do it for, a little HT, but you're not going to work a lot with a little
Wasn't
HT.
5 watts enough for satellite work? Like
Says who?
what are you running at field? Are you running up 25 watts?
Between 10 and 80 watts, depending on what I need. So if it's 2 meter uplink, it's usually about 20 watts. If it's UHF uplink, I try to push it more to about 80. Field day is a hard thing because everyone's on the satellite, and everyone's kind of stomping on you, whatever. At home, usually 10 watts is fine. So what you need. You can do this with an HT, but, do you really want to? Ideally, what you want is a full duplex, two band transceiver. That's needed for the FM satellites. Can you use 2 HTs? Yes, but you can't, you can with 2 HT. If you use a single HT, you can't hear yourself, and you really need to hear yourself. You can use 2 HTs with 2 different antennas and all that stuff, or separate VHF and UHF transceivers. So you should have a way to listen to you, because you don't know if someone's stomping on you or not, right? That's really important. They do make some HTs which are dual band, right? They have a
Full duplex.
Full duplex, that's the word. They have full duplex radios. That would be the best thing to do that for. But if you only do FM satellites, you will get bored quickly. You'll work a couple of passes. Oh yeah, this is good fun. And then after a while, it's like, all right, now what do I do? Kind of like FT8. It's exciting for a while, and then, all right, how do we up our game? Well, then you look at the linear transponder satellites. So you're going to need an all-mode transceiver, which can do full duplex, VHF, UHF. Okay, and we'll talk about a few of them. Or, if you don't have the money for a radio like that, 2 separate radios, one on 2 meter sideband, one on UHF sideband, and you can use the both of them together. So suitable radios. Okay, so if money is no object, you want to go for the best. You get the ICOM IC 9700. You drop about $1,900. Anyone got that kind of money kicking around? All right. That's pretty much, I use one, it's great. It takes you forever and a day to figure out the menus. Okay, and I don't read manuals. That's like a sign of weakness. I don't read the instruction book. I figure it out. You have to sit there, push buttons, and eventually you figure out how to go. Yeah.
How about the 847, which is designed as a satellite radio?
I don't know that listed. I mean, I listed a few that I've heard of. Yeah, I mean, it could be a good one. The 817 and 818, I hear people talk about, only like $650 used. They just discontinued it. It's low power though. 5 watts will work most of the time, but there may be times when you want more power and you don't have it. The ICOM 9100, that's about 8 years old. Looks like a good radio. Kenwood 2000. Well, you have a Kenwood 2000.
You spelled it wrong.
What?
It's the TS 2000.
TS? I don't know, TS, TR. That'll do satellites. And then you got the main standby, the Yaesu 736, which is 35 years old, and the Yaesu 726, which is 40 years old. I have both of those. So the 726 is deaf as a post on UHF. So you need a preamp with it if you're going to use it on UHF. And Yaesu kind of like pissed me off many years ago. Yaesu's like buying an Edsel. They break often. How do I know this? Because I'm fixing them often. I have ICOMs and Kenwoods, I don't fix them as often. So yeah, that can be a problem too if you want reliability. But it does work though. And so the way it works is you put it into satellite mode, and it receives on whatever band you set it up to do. And then when you change the V and the U, you can either change the VFO for the transmit side or change the VFO for the receive side. Which one do you turn when you're Doppler shifting? They tell me that you should change the higher frequency. Now, of course, if you change on the higher frequency when you're transmitting, you start drifting in addition to the Doppler shift. So I like to kind of get them set up, and then when someone's calling me, then I switch to the receive side and try to tune them in. Because they're going to be a little bit off. It's kind of like a little waltzing around with each other. Okay, so this is my setup at field day. That's a 726. There, 736 in the middle. You see the rotor to the right. This was the newer version where I actually had a real rotor. On top there is a 100-watt UHF amp. Above that is a Yaesu 8500. That's for the FM satellites, which is not being used in this particular pass. You see a watt meter there. That's to watch the power output, make sure that's good. And there's a code key there and some other things. So yeah, the 736 went down last year. I was in the middle of a pass on UHF and no power output. What the heck? And I was on the guy, I was going to work the guy, and the power just stopped. I thought I blew up the amp. It wasn't. The radio stopped putting out power. What happened is the pin diode opened up inside the radio. And the pin diode is buried way, way down in the guts. What a horror show to fix that. But I did make the satellite contact because I switched to the next satellite, which was a UV. I transmitted on V, and the UHF side worked, so I got away with it. If that didn't work, I'd have to go on an FM satellite. That's a picture of the 9700. Much smaller. Okay, and you got all these menus. You know, you got about 15 levels of menus and whatever, so it'll take a while to figure out. But all sorts of preamps in there and bandwidths and all this stuff. Yeah, it's you know, you pay a lot of money for it, but you get quite a bit out of it. So yeah, that's like I said, if you really want something that works well, that will certainly do it. But the older radios work well too. You know, they work okay as well. So that's what you. How many guys are on the linear satellites? Anybody? So you guys are all new at this. So yeah, that's what you really want to shoot for is a linear. Not, yeah, the FM is fine. You get a couple of yucks out of it, but doing this is fine. Now, what do you got for satellites? Always review the satellite status. I actually have a page on amsat.org where you can look at the satellite status, because satellite was there last year, it ain't there this year, right? They like stopped working. They had a whole slew of Chinese satellites, there were 6 of them. And they worked really well, they were loud as hell or whatever, man, we made all sorts of contacts, and the next year, all gone. Made in China. I don't know, I mean, they all stopped working, and most of them have re-entered, most of them burned up, actually. So,
When the Chinese government was practicing.
I don't know, I don't know the details, but I know that they didn't last. There was an Indian satellite also, 52, that was really fine satellite, very easy to hear, and it just stopped working. Remember, you're in space, there's all sorts of radiation and crud and bad stuff for electronics, so when you think about AMSAT Oscar 7 being up there for 50 years and still working after a fashion, that's pretty amazing. So satellites go offline or fall down, new satellites become active, and even though they shoot up the satellites in orbit, doesn't mean you can use it. They may have it turned off for whatever reason. So you want to look at the status. They actually have a status page where people upload whether they heard the satellite or not. That's the best thing, because that is moment to moment. So I'll go work a satellite and I'll go on there and say, yep, I worked RS-44, or I heard this one, or I didn't hear this one, whatever, and you look at it, you have a pretty good idea what is really there and what's really not. Then you keep a cheat sheet of satellite frequencies. So this is the popular satellites. There's more of them, but these are the ones I shoot for. So the linears, which are on top, RS-44 is the high one, okay? It's 830 miles up. It's a VU satellite, and it works really well. You got JO97, which came from Jordan. That's a UV. So you'll hear that one a lot easier, but it runs less power. AO73 is from the US. They kind of turn that off sometimes, so you have to kind of keep track of it. Usually the week before field day, it's turned off. And then right at field day, they turn it on, so you have to figure that out. And they got a brand new one. They call it the Hades satellites from Michigan, MO124, and it has, MO24. It's 300 miles up. It's another US satellite. The FM, we got a whole bunch. You have ISS, space station. That's low, okay? But it's loud. If you can't hear that, you have a problem. And that's quite easy to hear, quite easy to get into. SO50, PW, it's been the noise, very hard to hear. But it's been there a long time. You got AO91. That one is on only during the day. They don't have very good batteries in that. They shut it off in darkness. And SO124, and there's also a new one, SO125, which is pretty brand new actually. And there are others, but these are the ones that.
What do the letters mean? Is it
Yeah.
Oscar? And what is the S and
Well,
the first letter is where it's from, right?
like Japan?
J, well, yeah.
Jordan.
JO, at Japan was, I think, JA they used. RS is radio support for Russia. Yeah, so they have them different names. They have a name when they shoot it off, and then when it's in orbit and it's available, to give it another name. That's what some of the pictures look like. So RS-44, you can't tell from the picture, but that thing is about 7 feet. The can is 7 feet long. That big antenna, I think, is 10 meters. I think they have an HF antenna on board. The VHF and UHF stuff is this stuff on the bottom here. But that's a pretty big pile of work there. These other guys, SO50, this thing is about, I don't know, less than a foot. These are like, they call them fun cubes or whatever, little cubes. There's your 97, there's your 73. ISS, well, people live on that thing. I mean, that's pretty big. So.
Mitch, those satellites, are they just for transmitting and receiving? They have no other function?
The ham ones?
Yeah.
Well, the RS-44, the SO-50, is that its own?
There are other non-ham things going on with the Russian satellites that we don't necessarily know about. So I don't know what they're doing here. They usually, and there was another thing on there that was supposed to detach, and it wasn't detached, so it's kind of like in the way when the antenna rotates. So I've heard that story too. But some people put up, like colleges put up satellites. You can talk to them, but they have other things they're doing. They're tracking. They have other stuff that they're interested in, and Ham's using it as kind of like a secondary function. So you kind of have to go with what they allow you to do with it.
Michigan State was a college one for metrology weather stations, and they gave it over to Hams because Hams had helped pay for the satellite.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of those up there too, so you gotta watch schools.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. It says, if you go to AMSAT.org, go to satellite status, they have a whole page where you can see which satellite, if it's red, it means they didn't hear it, and if it's, I think, green or whatever, it means they did. And you can see which ones are being worked and which ones are, not there. There's some satellites that I've used years ago that people occasionally hear the telemetry from it, but not much else, things pretty much broken. This is my cheat sheet I keep at the station. This basically tells me the frequencies I need to go. So like if I look on the RS-44, the next line is 730 to 930 miles up, 5-watt power, and then upper sideband receive, lower sideband transmit. So the center is 435.64. That's where I put my receiver at the start of the pass. And then I put the transmitter on 145.965. The two won't necessarily correspond because the Doppler, remember the Doppler is different for UHF and VHF, but eventually I have a starting point. And then I move depending on where I find myself and also where everyone else is, because there may be somebody transmitting on that frequency that I have to move off. This is just for the linears. I have a separate one for the FMs that I use as well. This kind of tells me where everybody is, and if I screw up and I put the frequency as 436.64, guess what? I don't hear it. So I have to make sure that what this paper says is what I put on the VFO, otherwise it don't work. So steps to work through a satellite. So I don't have a video of me working a satellite because it looks horrible. So first thing, you want to check your pass predictions. You want to, and lately the satellites have been either early in the morning or late in the, I'm not early in the morning. Early in the morning is a sleeping time, right? Past 12 o'clock, there's not much going on. That's just the way it is. But then they start getting very busy around 6, 7 o'clock at night. So I forego dinner and I just work satellites. So you want to check the predictions, who's going to be on what. If it's a low pass, like 10 degrees, I don't bother with it usually because it's just a lot of effort. You don't get any payback. You preset the Aggies, and normally sometimes I have 2 different rotors I got to use, sometimes 1. So you want to get them to where they start and preset the frequencies. And I start on CW because it's easy to find a CW signal. So a few minutes after AOS, till you acquire the satellite, I move the transmit until I can find the RF signal. And basically, why don't you move the receive? Because you hear other people in, you can't tell if it's them or you. Whereas a little on frequency, and I hear a frequency swishing across, and that's me, there I am. And as soon as I do that, I start CQing in CW. How many know CW? Okay, that's an important thing to know. Why can't I use FT8? Ain't gonna work. You're drifting like a son of a gun there, right at the top of the shift. That's gonna be bad. So you learn CW or 5 words a minute, whatever you need to do, and then I'd send a couple of CQs because at that point you're kind of weak, right? And use headphones because you got to hear yourself as you're transmitting. Headphones are important. So when the signal increases to a point where you hear yourself well, then you switch to sideband. You got to remember, put that transmitter in lower sideband, it won't work. And when you hear it, you'll hear yourself talking. You'll CQ and you hear on the thing, maybe a 1/10 of a second delay, you'll hear CQ. You'll actually hear yourself through the satellite. If you can hear yourself through the satellite, you're golden. It means other people can hear you. If you cannot hear yourself through the satellite, 1 or 2 things. Either you're on the wrong frequency or you ain't cutting the mustard and you need more power somewhere.
More power, Scotty.
More power, that's right, yeah. So again, just the higher band to keep on frequency, that's what AMSAT tells us. Give your call signs slowly and phonetically. People on HF do this. They race their call sign, run letters together. Somebody's got to hear you and understand you. You may know your call sign, they don't. So, phonetically, always, and slowly, because you remember, you're drifting around and everything, and the signals are weak. You're on the clock. Stay on point. Don't. I mean, I kept going these satellites. I found these two guys. The conversation would jump from satellite to satellite. It's like, don't you guys have anything better to do? Get on the phone. Don't use up the satellite sitting there, the same boring conversation. But yeah, you know, exchange your call sign. Hello, how you doing? You're FN 34 in Vermont. Yeah, fine, business, goodbye, see you. And who's next? And remember to move the Aggie. Don't sit there and then, hey, the thing's getting weak, and then, oh, I got to move the Aggie. Right? You got that going on
Are you
too.
going to discuss what programs to use and computer control of the Aggie at all?
No, I'm not. I'm going to tell you that it's there. It's for you to figure that out. So if you want to do high performance, which I don't, mount the antennas high up away from trees and structure. So when the antenna's in my driveway, when I point southwest, I'm pointing right into the house. And when I'm pointing to the northeast, I'm pointing into the neighbor's house. And the pine trees all around, so it's not great. Have both azimuth and elevation rotors. Well, I never have an elevation rotor, and sometimes I have an azimuth rotor. I still work with people, but it doesn't work as well. Have high power when necessary. Then set up the computer to turn the rotors. I have a program, and the tracking program tells the computer, tells the rotors, okay, point here, point there, and the rotor turn automatically. And then they have a program that automatically adjusts for Doppler. Well, if the computer is doing all that, it's simple enough to have the computer also have AI and put your voice there and call CQ and log the person. And you are not necessary, okay? So this is the way I am. I have a radio. I don't have my computer hooked to my HF radio. I have a K3. Why ruin a perfectly good radio by hooking a computer to it? That's me. Not all of you agree with that, but that's it. If it's too easy, then you don't have as much fun with it. So, final thoughts. It's not just about the QSO. I mean, it's learning about how this stuff works and how to get better at it. I mean, it's a lot of experimentation and stuff. Don't just live for the FM satellites. It's a good place to start, but it kind of gets boring pretty fast. Try a multitude of different satellites and operating modes. I mean, the beauty of this is when the bands are dead, you can still do this stuff. I mean, 20 meters is open more than the satellites are, but sometimes, you know, it just goes wonky on you. You learn more about space communication. You learn about how the challenge is to do this. You find ways to improve your station. You know, use computers to do different things. And you teach others to get on the satellites. Well, that's what I'm doing here, right? And, you know, it's pretty lonely on some of the satellites. If it's past to the east over the ocean, I'll call CQ for 10 minutes, there ain't nobody there. And I have a beautiful signal. Because one's on UHF, one's on VHF. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.